Hey guys, what's up? Unrested here, and I'm sitting in my next to you location once again in the park. And maybe you just missed it. Granny was working out over there on the bars. Man, old people love to work out on those bars. They're getting fit and shredded. And hey, I'm not making fun of people when I say stuff like that. People say they're like, "Oh, you say it's not good to make fun of people, but then you make fun of them in the back of your video when they're working out." I'm rooting for them. It's cool that they're working out. I can't talk about it without sounding a little bit funny voice, and that's supposed to be making fun of them? No, man, it's cool. You know what? I hope I stay that fit when I'm old. I hope I try to keep working out. Anyway, I'm back again with another JFAQ, and it comes from a user's name Sea Star Sailor from Belgium. I hope I got all that right. I just have to try and remember it. I never write anything down. That's my style. I don't write anything down. I just don't like to keep looking down at something while I talk into the camera. It takes me away from you, and I don't ever want to be taken away from you, baby. Um, our question today is a good one. He talked a little bit about a guy who was living on an island and living with nature in Okinawa. There's some really small islands. You guys probably don't know this. There's literally something like 6,000 tiny micro islands off the coast of Japan. Many that aren't inhabited. I think anything that's like over 1 mile, like in circumference, is considered an island. And so there's just tons of them. And some of these little islands have like just one or two people living on them. They're really tiny. They live with nature. There's even some really interesting islands that probably a lot of you may have heard of, like Nekoshima, which is Cat Island. It's like covered in cats. Many probably don't know Usagishima, which is Rabbit Island. It's covered in rabbits. Some of these islands also have like oxen. They don't use cars or anything. They just have oxen. I actually have one video in my Unrested Japan Journeys videos. I think that's the playlist name. Where I went to a very small island named Kohamajima, and I think it only had about 500 people living there. I went to a resort out there and lived on the island for about a week, and it was really fun. It was great. It was such a finally get in touch with nature type situation. They had onsens, they had swimming pools and everything. No one cared about my tattoos there. I was kind of surprised. I thought for sure I would have shocked some people out there, but nope, they were cool with it. They let me go into the onsen, they let me go into the swimming pool. You know, sometimes that's a no-no in Japan. Anyway, so the JFAQ today, the question that he had was a good one because he said, I think you haven't talked about this before, and he's totally right. Comparisons between countryside Japan and city Japan. So we're seeing things like Tokyo and Osaka, which many of you already know, very city, urban areas of Japan, compared to places like far out in Okinawa, like Ishigaki Island, which is a very, very countryside. And even more so, some of these islands, like if you ever watch a Japanese drama movie, oftentimes if they have the country folk visits the city area, they often usually take a ferry into the main island of Japan and come from some very, very tiny, tiny little place. And this is very real. These kind of places do exist. These kind of tiny islands, tiny countryside islands. Some of them don't even have a hospital. If you get in any kind of emergency where you need hospital level care, a helicopter has to fly out to the island and take you to a nearby hospital. Which I don't know if I would do that as I got older in Japan. Like as I got up there in age, that would kind of feel very risky. It's very brave of those people to live out on those islands like that with no hospital and just hope that a helicopter can life flight them there in time. Anyway, how are these places different? Well, I'm just going to speak from my own personal experiences. So your experiences may vary. Some people may say, "Oh, that's not what I think." Okay. It's your personal opinion. You're allowed to have it. Me too. I'd say kind of the main differences are the same kind of differences that you would see in America as far as countryside people and the way they think about or talk about places like New York City or LA. They think about Tokyo and Osaka in the same manner. Many of them have not traveled there yet, or if they have, they talk about it like it was a big trip, like really exciting, whereas, you know, if I travel from Osaka to Tokyo, that's okay, it's alright, but I'm not like blown away because they're not that different from each other. They're, you know, big city. Tokyo's more crowded to me, that's about it. And that's the one thing that really varies too, is countryside is not crowded like that. Countryside, you may have giant open land areas, a lot of time rice growing areas, crops, different types of crops out there, but mostly rice is what you see. And then just a big Japanese style house in the middle of it. And even then, though, I will say a big house out in the countryside is still comparably very small compared to like Western American sized houses out in the middle of the countryside. They're still very tiny. They do not build big, and they still stick to these tiny rooms. It's very common in Japan to keep every room very tiny. I don't know if because I have a couple theories on why, and there might be a totally, legit reason behind it that I'm not even mentioning. But number one, there's only very small parts of Japan where they actually build because a lot of times mountainside doesn't let them build, and they don't want to just blow up and dynamite mountains to build in certain areas. So even though we have, I think what is it like 3 times the land of New Zealand, we only actually build on about 30% of the land here in Japan. A lot of people don't know that. And it's mostly because the government doesn't want to just dynamite the mountains and set up houses. And that's why they kind of always squeeze these tiny little houses in there with little to no yards into small urban or residential areas. And that tends to make the houses very small, and that tends to make the rooms very small. And then I don't know if I always have this theory that in my mind I'm thinking they'll tell the people, oh, this room has, this house has 30 rooms on the first floor, and they're just all like these closet-sized rooms. I don't know if that sounds like a great deal, and that's how they use a selling point, or people just really prefer these very tiny rooms. Personally, when I moved into my house in the middle of the city, I actually had a bedroom knocked out so that I could have a normal-sized living room and let my kids run around the house. But maybe that's a big selling point. It does not change when you get out to the countryside. They still have these tiny little rooms. The houses do tend to be bigger. They are a lot cheaper. Any of the big expensive prices that you see inside the city is if you're ever like online looking for an apartment to rent or a house to buy or something like that in Japan, and you're just comparing prices, as soon as you get out to the countryside they do become reasonable. There's even some that are just like, wow, I can't believe they're that cheap. For example, I recently watched a variety show, Bambi Good, and that show's always about these poor girls trying to find apartments around Japan. Like they just finished college or finished high school and are trying to live on their own and don't have a lot of money. And they showed these houses in Hokkaido where you could buy a house and it was only Juman, which is like $1,000. Now it was just a one-room house. That's it. It's just one room, but it has like a bathroom and a kitchen and everything. And some of these like really, really poor artists who only sell like 1 or 2 pieces of artwork every year lived out there, and they had bought these houses that were $1,000. Now these houses were out in the middle of nowhere, and some of the luxuries you give up when you do move out into these countryside areas is you don't have things like a convenience in walking distance. Public transportation is more rare. For example, even if you just get out to Okinawa, they have a very small monorail, but that's about it. You don't have trains that take you all over the place for really cheap. Of course, you do have taxis, but taxis are still kind of expensive. You have buses, but buses don't always run on time, and buses can be confusing if you're a gaijin because oftentimes the kanji gets very difficult on buses. You won't be able to completely understand that until you try to actually use a bus in Japan, and then you'll say, "Oh, Scott was right." Like no matter how much kanji you know, some buses will totally confuse you with the kanji that they're using to name the different spots, unless you're just like a total kanji whiz. Anyway, that's some of the big differences. Transportation, convenience, grocery stores are few and far between. You might have to take quite a ride out to get to a grocery store. Oftentimes what a lot of these countryside places do is each of them will farm different agriculture, and whatever they have an overstock of or oversupply of, they'll go around to each person's house and give them a little bit of what they have to save them trips to the grocery store. They'll all trade a bunch of different stuff or have some kind of like potluck or some kind of trade up or trade off of all the different agriculture that they raise so that they can save people trips from going to the store and having to buy all these different things. They can just have a massive supply in their backyard because unlike the city, you actually can have a giant backyard in the middle of the countryside. A great movie to watch about how some of the countryside stuff goes on like that as far as trading vegetables and stuff like that. Okami no Kodomo, Ame to, what's the other kid's name? Yuki. Children of the Wolf. I think that's the English translation, right? Children of the Wolf. Yuki and Ame. Yuki and Ame, the Children of the Wolf. Anyway, I don't want to spoil it why it's called Children of the Wolf. But it does have, it starts out in the city, the story starts out in the city, but very quickly they have to move into the countryside, and you can kind of get a good idea of how folks interact and how folks grow agriculture or trade up vegetables and stuff to make sure they have a lot of food during the year by watching that movie. It's a great anime. What's one of the best I've seen in a while. I think it was by the same author who did The Girl Who Leapt Through Time and Summer Wars, but I could be wrong. Um, Anyway, moving on from there, anything else I'm missing about the countryside interactions? There probably is. There's probably a lot I'm missing. Oh, okay. How do they react to gaijin when you get out there? Yeah. So pretty much their chins, their mouths, their jaws are going to just absolutely drop to the ground when you get out there. There's been times where I've gone out to the countryside either because I got called out there for a job or a schoolwork or um, some sort of client meeting or something like that. And man, when I got out there, like usually the only convenies they have are right there at the train station that you get off on. And I would get off, I'd go into the conveni usually maybe to get like a drink or something for wherever I needed to walk to in case it was a really hot day. And I just remember people in there would have trouble shopping. They were staring so hard. Now, mind you, these are country folks who do not get to see gaijin very often. They've never been to the big city where it's very international. You can't blame this. They're not trying to be jerks. They're not trying to be like, oh my god, a dancing bear in my conveni. They're just very interested. And they're very curious because it's something they don't see every day. But man, the stares, man, they're just, and they're not malicious stares. They're not the stink eye. They're not the side view. They're just kind of like, in awe. Just in, like, oh my god. Guys, you just walk into the store. This guy just walked into the store, he's got tattoos. Oh my god. Like that. And yeah, it's a bit awkward. I'll be honest with you though, just like anything, you get used to it. Just like anything that happens in Japan, if you stay here long enough, you just get so used to it, it's like nothing to you. Anyway, guys, I'm sure there's some stuff I've missed out on, but I don't want to keep making this video go on for hours. It's not a ramble, it's a JFAQ. Let me know some other questions you might have about countryside Japan or comparisons to the city. Until next time, I'm Unrested. If you like what you saw here today, please like, comment, and subscribe.